All right, let's dig a little deeper and get some insight into these incredibly difficult peace efforts that are just really hanging by a thread. Andrew Tabler is a Next Generation Fellow in the program on Arab politics at the Washington Institute on Near East Policy. He was in Syria back in December. Right now we find him in the Czech Republic. He joins us from Prague. Great to have you with us. Your perspective, what does it mean that these talks have broken down and broken down really without even getting started? The government insisting we want to talk about terrorism, that is the opposition refusing.
Yeah, it really shows the limits of a diplomatic settlement at this point. The regional powers, Saudi Arabia and Iran, are very far apart. They're fighting on opposite sides in Syria, with Iran on the side of the Assad regime, Saudi Arabia on the side of the rebels, but also the international community. They are trying to hold these peace talks under the Geneva communique of 2012 about a transition, but the Assad regime doesn't want to talk about it. They want to talk about fighting terrorism and doing what they should be doing otherwise, and that is allowing humanitarian access into besieged areas. And it's no surprise that the talks broke down after just 2 rounds and very little to show for it.
Andrew, what is the reality then on the ground? Because, we've heard the reports again. It's the Saudis are going to be giving advanced arms to the rebels, the Russians feeding in more arms to the Assad government, the Iranians and Hezbollah on the ground active. Is there anything other than, a military confrontation and more slaughter in store for the Syrian people?
For the next few months, I expect that the death toll are going to rapidly accelerate. We've already seen statistics indicating that. I think that it's going to worsen. And most worryingly, and particularly for the region and also for the international community, President Assad is not only dragging his feet on the chemical weapons deal timeline, which is expected, but also is refusing to destroy 12 declared sites. And that's a very unfortunate development. Could bring the United States back into this in a very dramatic way as President Bashar al-Assad challenges President Obama directly here in the coming months.
Well, this week we heard from the UN that only 11%, and they were supposed to be completely gone by now, but only 11% of the chemical arms had been shipped out of the country at this point. Is this a way, because the U.S. has entered into these negotiations with the Syrian government, in effect, that they can prolong this at least one level of protection for the regime, because it has to remain in charge of all of these areas where these chemical weapons are in order for it to be able to fulfill its end of the bargain?
That's right. And it's only 11% of the first shipment of 500 tons. It's even worse than that. It's only 11% of the entire tonnage that needs to leave Syria. President Assad is saying, I'm not going to cooperate with you and destroy my chemical weapons as I'm obligated to do as a signatory to the Convention on concerning chemical weapons. I'm only going to do so if you agree to my terms to a peace in Syria, an enforced peace. And that one doesn't involve a transition. Everything has to be out of Syria by June 30th. That's going to be the showdown date. President Assad has to be reelected, quote, as president of Syria by July 7th. Lots of things are lining up here. It's going to be a very rough spring, I'm afraid, for Middle East diplomacy and a lot of bloodshed in Syria.
Well, let's look closer term. In Homs, we understand that humanitarian ceasefire that was extended for 3 days this week in and around the old city there is about to expire, and activists there are quoted in Beirut's Daily Star as saying they fear a massive government onslaught.
That's correct. In all of these areas, the regime has only really allowed in humanitarian assistance under very strange circumstances. And then the areas where there are ceasefires, they usually open up with both barrels, so to speak. I expect we're going to see the same thing in Homs. It's going to be very, very bloody in and around that city in the coming days.
Bottom line, President Barack Obama continues to say, this is one of the highest priorities for my administration, this Syria issue. I mean, is he going to be confronted with put up or shut up?
I think he will be. Now, concerning chemical weapons, there's still some time. But if you notice his statements, very interesting. In his State of the Union speech, he talked about supporting the moderate rebels that reject extremism. And today in the Wall Street Journal, there's a story that not only is Saudi Arabia developing and providing shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles to the rebels, but the United States is paying the salaries of those in the southern front, the moderate rebels, which are south of Damascus, pressuring the government there, but also bordering Israel. It's an operation to help isolate extremists inside of Syria and pressure President Bashar al-Assad, and we'll have to see how it works.
Andrew Tabler, I want to thank you very much for joining us there from Prague. We appreciate your perspective on this very important issue.